Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to Sports Beat Live, coming to you from Chiefs training camp in St. Joe, Missouri. We are here to talk Chiefs with you. Please send us your questions and comments, and with the people who know them best in the media, and that is star columnist Sam McDowell and beat writers Herbie Teope and Jesse Newell. We're sponsored by First Federal Bank. You'll hear from them later in the show. And Herbie, Sam, and I taking advantage of the nice air conditioning here at Bloom Union on the campus of Missouri Western. Jesse Newell has chosen not to go that route. And so what's the heat index out there on the quad, Jesse?
All I know is I'm sweating on this black table. So I hope the people appreciate the sacrifices I go through when there are 4 ugly mugs on your screen. At least there's some beautiful scenery in the back of me.
There is, and once again, I liken it to Augusta. I'm just waiting for the birds to chirp in the background. So we had some of that this weekend. Okay, so we're here, and the Chiefs are here. There was one Chief who was not here, but he's expected to be here pretty soon, and that is Orlando Brown Jr. That's the news of the day. So left tackle who was offered a long-term deal after last year, decided to turn it down, has been given the franchise tag. He's going to play this year for $16.7 million. And he did not come to camp the first week. Herbie, remind me and explain to our audience that what exactly was Orlando Brown Jr.'s position and why didn't he show up the first week of camp?
Well, technically, he didn't necessarily have to because he's not under contract. When a player is franchise tagged, they don't sign the tender yet. They don't necessarily have to be here, and the team cannot levy a financial fine on him. But now that he is, our colleague Sam McDowell reported roughly about an hour ago that he is actually physically in St. Joe. Once he signs that tender, now he's under contract, so he has to, he'll go through the conditioning phase. And then the Chiefs have to decide if they want him to go ahead and practice based on his conditioning. Now, here's a change to the CBA. In the past years, players had to go through an acclimation period. But Andy Reid alluded to it today during his post-practice news conference that, they can realistically put him on the field now. But I think what you're probably going to end up seeing is they will see where he is after his conditioning, because it makes no sense. You got your starting left tackle here. You don't want to put him out there if he's not ready for the physical stuff.
Right. I absolutely don't expect him to be out there right away. And so, Jesse, what were we hearing about Orlando Brown and what he was doing away from camp away from training camp, through the summer. And, of course, he was not part of OTAs either.
Yeah, I mean, the first report of him coming to camp today or showing up in camp today was from Robert Griffin III, who in his basically spoke about how Orlando Brown was in the best shape of his life and ready to come into camp. And I think some of that you sort of have to tune through a filter, because most likely the information he's getting is from the sources you would think he's getting his information from, which is likely either, Orlando Brown's people or his agent. So we'll see when he comes in here. But I think Herbie sort of hit on the main point here, which is this is mostly just avoiding the catastrophic circumstance for the Chiefs, which would have been Orlando Brown being upset enough to either hold out all the way, or holdout's the wrong word, but not come to camp all the way until potentially right before the first game to put the Chiefs in a lurch, or not decide to just not play under that franchise tender and not sign the franchise tag, which would make him $16.7 million. So it seems like so many weeks of the offseason, we can only talk about what's directly in front of us. And so Orlando Brown was the biggest topic directly in front, obviously as the left tackle for the Chiefs, but this sort of avoids becoming a big story. There's enough time now to get into camp, to get acclimated, to get in the playbook, to get into shape, that the Chiefs should not be affected for week 1 against Arizona. So that's probably the best outcome that this thing could have happened once they didn't come to a long-term deal.
Yeah, Sam, look, it would have been a bad deal for the Chiefs to, they've been running Roderick Johnson at left tackle, and Andrew Wiley played there in the most previous practice. It would have been bad for the Chiefs to not have Orlando Brown Jr., but I think it would have been a disaster for Orlando Brown Jr. not to come to camp.
Yeah, I mean, he had, I think, the most to lose by not being here. So I think he made a decision that validates the Chiefs made the right call by franchise tagging. I mean, their risk was obviously minimized today. But, he made even a better decision for himself. I mean, he would have been late as far as, he might not technically have to go through the acclimatization period, but he's still going to have to get acclimated to playing NFL football. And that needed to come in training camp and not, 2 weeks before the season because, I wrote this last week. I talked to several professional trainers. They said he's going to have some things that are going to bother his body because his body is moving in a way it hasn't moved in a while at NFL game speed. But I'm still interested to see, I can't help but think a year ago when Tyron Mathieu didn't get his deal, and then, he told me in March it affected him all year long, knowing that he was playing for his next contract. Players take that differently. The contract year is a cliche phrase, but that's not how every player takes it. And it's going to be interesting to see how Orlando Brown Jr. takes it.
I'll say this before we go to we'll go to Andy Reid and hear his comments today on Orlando Brown Jr., including a little funny exchange with Sam McDowell. Tyron Mathieu had proved himself to me as an NFL player. He was already an all Pro Bowler, all pro. It was really at the top of his position. Orlando Brown's still trying to get there and still trying to gain a foothold among NFL left tackles, and wanted the type of money that would have made him among the highest paid NFL left tackles. I'm not sure his play warrants that. In fact, I think what the Chiefs offered him in terms of a long-term deal and the guaranteed money probably is, more worthy than his career so far, or what he showed for the Chiefs in, the 1 year he's played left tackle. So I think it's good that he's here. I expect him to be walking down the path tomorrow morning, no matter what he does on the field. But I think he'll be on the path tomorrow morning, and he'll begin his season of having to really, I think, prove himself.
Yeah, there is a little bit of a difference. I'm going to reference that Tyron Mathieu situation. I mean, Brett Veach did tell Jesse and Herbie last week that they still view Orlando Brown in their long-term plans. Now, we heard that about Tyron Mathieu at this time last year too, from those same people. I do think it's more plausible that, they want Orlando Brown beyond this year. Maybe he doesn't feel the same pressure of feeling like he's playing for, to have any interest from the team he's currently on. But he's without a doubt playing for his next contract. And you mentioned it, Blair. I mean, it's not just a guy that has produced before and therefore all he has to do is repeat himself. I think Orlando Brown has to take a step forward in order to get the contract he wants, not just prove he can repeat what he did last year.
Monty says, I think he's trying to tell Chiefs if next year he doesn't get a contract, he's likely to be a longer holdout. I think that's right. Okay, let's hear what Andy Reid had to say about the Orlando Brown situation.
I've been for Orlando. I show up today. What's the ramp-up period like, if that is the case? How many days until he can really get going?
Yeah, so you have the right to, I guess, throw him back in and go. We'll, when he gets here, we'll talk to him and see where he's at, and then, be smart with it. So, I haven't seen him.
Have you heard any indication that he will be here soon or this week or anything?
There's a good chance. When the fish is in the boat, then I'll let you know.
How important is it for the fish to be in the boat and to get here with enough time to get ready for the preseason?
Yeah, well, you said it. That's what it is. It's hard to mimic the game speed and putting the uniform on and so on, helmet and pads on when you're doing stuff on your own. So you got to go through that to get yourself right, and he understands that.
So, Jesse, what do you think? If let's just say Orlando Brown is on the practice field tomorrow in some way or another, is he? You think there's enough time for him to get ready for a preseason game against the Chicago Bears in less than 2 weeks?
I don't know about preseason, but I don't know that preseason really matters, right? I mean, you can throw whoever you want to at left tackle. The big picture here is week 1 and beyond. And again, if him not signing the tag and if him not showing up to camp continued to be a story, and then you start to get to a point where you're like, okay, is it going to be a matter of him being able to be ready for week 1, week 2, week 3? Then you're starting to talk about the real game. So I don't know. Again, they're going to ease him in, as Sam said, most likely, and not rush things through with him. But I just don't know that Chicago Bears really matters that much. I think the Chiefs need to circle that game one, and when it really matters, need to have Orlando Brown ready to go and protect Patrick Mahomes' blind side, and I think that's going to happen.
Herbie, without Orlando Brown to practice this past week, since the Chiefs had been in camp, they did get a chance to look at other players there. What do you think this might say, or what might happen now with offensive line depth, knowing that Orlando Brown's going to be back at tackle? Has your mind changed at all about who the 8 or 9 offensive linemen are going to be for this team this season?
I think, if anything, with Orlando Brown set to return, and the fact that you had Roderick Johnson running with the ones since the last week of OTAs, and then all through mandatory minicamp, and now through the first week of training camp, he's probably got the inside track to be the all-important swing tackle, because he can play right and left tackle. After that, then you're going to have to figure out what you want to do with Darian Kennard and even Jaron Christian, because he's also competing for that swing role as well as Kennard, because Kennard has lined up at right tackle and left tackle. So you got to identify those guys first. But Brown getting in camp now is the big piece, and then let all the other pieces fall around him.
Okay. And Monty asks again, who did Chiefs release to make room for Orlando Brown Jr.? They haven't done anything yet.
No, they haven't done anything yet. You got to expect something like that will come down the pipe here as soon as he puts pen to paper, though.
Okay. All right. Look, if it hadn't been for the Orlando Brown Jr. news today, we would have led with first day in pads practice. So we'll talk about that as soon as we hear from First Federal Bank.
When I bought my first home, I was searching for listings and negotiating all on my own. Now I'm back in the housing market, and I could not imagine doing that again. But then I found First Federal Bank of Kansas City's expert loan advisors at ffbkc.com. They were kind, knowledgeable, and available 24/7. My loan advisor answered my questions and helped me feel confident all the way through closing. I trust First Federal Bank because they understand banking is personal. Apply today for a home loan at ffbkc.com/homes. First Federal Bank of Kansas City. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
We're back on SportsBeat KC, SportsBeat Live. SportsBeat KC is the podcast that this program will become later, but we're on SportsBeat Live from training camp with beat writers Jesse Newell and Herbie Teope and columnist Sam McDowell. It was giddy in the press tent above the practice field today because it was first day in pads. Herbie, I know you were pretty excited about it. It was first day in pads, and so there was contact, but no tackling to the ground quite yet, is there?
No, not yet. And you've got to go back to last year, because with all the CBA rules in place now, player safety, et cetera, it's not going to be like it was 10, 15 years ago where you had 2-a-days, and then one of those 2-a-days was just flat out smash mouth football. Now you have to ease into it. And Andy Reid mentioned today after practice that the players are going to have to go through the same process they did without pads. So you're going to have a ramp-up period. Today there was contact. You did hear pads smacking, but tackling to the ground is probably not going to occur for about another maybe 3 or 4 days, and then we're going to see that.
All right, so did you see anything today that stood out now that they do have pads? The one thing that stood out to me was a number of players that went into the tent to get some water. How about between you and Jesse, did you guys see anything today that really caught your eye?
Well, for me, with the first day of pads, I make a beeline, or I always try to find where the offensive linemen and defensive linemen are lining up, because now you can actually see how they look with contact. I'll tell you this, George Karlaftis, you heard Frank Clark talk about him on Saturday and how that rookie excited him, and you saw why. During one-on-one drills, I'm looking at my notes here, a bull rush on 68, Evan, oh boy, starts with a K. Number 68, the offensive lineman. He just bull rushed them and just was in the pocket before you knew it. His last pass rush against 71, Roderick Johnson just embarrassed him. And then who was the first one to welcome him after that effort there? Frank Clark. Frank Clark gave him a big bro hug, big high five, and you heard all the fans over there that were watching those drills. Way to go, young man. Way to go, George. Karlaftis, he's got that motor, nonstop effort.
How about you, Jesse? Did anybody stick out to you today?
Well, I want Jesse to try to pronounce the guy's last name.
No, that was all you, Herbie. You were over on the lineman, so I'm going to leave that all up to you. By the way, I'm starting to realize the definition of hot seat. It is a black metal chair I'm sitting on that is now in the sun here in St. Joseph. So any of those coaches, those college football coaches that are out there and talking about the hot seat, it is no fun to sit on the hot seat. No, I was watching more 7-on-7 from the comfy confines of the media tent, and so did not watch as much of those drills. But I would say not as much stood out today, but I think just a continuation of what we talked about, Blair, and this is what I wrote about that's up on the Kansas City Star right now, which is you are starting, the pads come on and there's more training camp left, but we talked with Brett Veach about how he's so interested in the running back battle that's going on, and this trend continued. Isaiah Pacheco was taking some first-team reps, so that's another rookie to watch, guys. I mean, we've talked about all these rookies, like Joshua Williams, a fourth-round pick, has kind of emerged. Trent McDuffie has kind of taken over their number one corner spot and run with it. Brian Cook's been on the field for a lot of stuff, especially when they get into their dime packages, that sort of stuff. So you see a lot of rookies sort of meeting expectations. But the fact that Isaiah Pacheco's out there getting first-team reps alongside, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is also subbing in, and then Jerick McKinnon, I think it tells you something. And then it's also keeping an eye on Ronald Jones. I was the guy that wrote earlier this offseason how Ronald Jones' power and how he immediately hits a hole, how that could really help the Chiefs move the pile forward. And instead of getting 4 or 5 yards, getting 8 or 9 yards and being a big difference for the offense. But he's mostly been with the twos here so far. So just something to keep an eye on with that running back battle. And like I said, Brett Veach, when we talked to him a couple of days ago, seemed very interested in how that was going to turn out. He likes that room, and he thinks it's a very crowded room.
For sure. Hey, so one thing that caught all of our eyes toward the end of practice was Patrick Mahomes limping. And what is there an update on that? Any one of you who have heard anything just from the end of practice? Is there an update on Patrick Mahomes?
Let Herbie take this one. Go, Herbie.
Well, we actually, the Kansas City Star had an opportunity, myself and Jesse Newell, to sit down with Patrick Mahomes. Of course, that was obviously my first question. And he essentially, confirmed what Andy Reid said. Someone stepped on him. And then he also went on to say the nature of his position, someone, offensive lineman will always step on him, but he didn't feel any pain, so he knew he was okay. And the fact that he talked to us tells you he's fine, because the Chiefs were not going to give him to us if he was hurt.
Right. True that. And the other, and I'll just take, I'll take this one, Herbie, that Jody Fortune didn't practice today, added to the injury list. And Herbie, hoping beyond hope that Jody Fortune returns soon.
We're gonna get rid of one. That's going to be Herbie.
Hey, Sam, I wanted to ask you, so Dan asked about how bad does not signing Mathieu hurt the Chiefs, and did they have a real chance of signing him? Nobody spent more time with Tyron Mathieu than you did in between seasons, and you had an interesting observation about Tyron Mathieu just today.
Yeah, he hasn't been at Saints training camp. He's got a personal family matter is what they're terming it. But Dennis Allen, the Saints' first-year head coach, first of all, I can't believe I'm the one bringing New Orleans up in this conversation. This is the first time ever that Herbie has not been the one to bring up New Orleans. But Dennis Allen said they're going to give him as much time as he needs. And so we don't know what that personal situation is, but he's not a guy who misses practice very often. And so, hopefully everything's okay with him and certainly with his family, because, again, that's what they've termed it. But to get to the other part of Dan's question, I mean, they had a chance, but it was their choice. That they're the ones who elected not to go that route. They went younger with Justin Reid. I know also as part of that sit down that Jesse and Herbie had with Brett Veach, that Justin Reid came up. So I should probably pass the baton to Jesse Newell to let him finish this off on Justin Reid.
Hey, don't hate on me. I'm trying to bring up the Twitter follower count. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that, Sam. No, I did ask because the Chiefs targeted Justin Reid early in the offseason, and I'd asked Brett Veach kind of what was the thinking with that. So this will be in a future story at kansas.com as well. But he talked about, and I thought the answer was fascinating, he talked about how when the Chiefs play teams like the Ravens and like the Bills, where you have a running quarterback, that when you're in your nickel package, you really need a safety to be able to come downhill and help in the run game. And so they saw that in Justin Reid and just, I think the describing word that Veach used at one point was like a missile. They see him coming down like a missile and being able to help out in the run game. And so, from what we've seen in press conferences so far, Justin Reid kind of has that presence in a very different way at the podium than Tyron Mathieu does. Tyron Mathieu kind of hard on his sleeve. Justin Reid is very professional and, very good talker. Seems to be like he could take over sort of a leadership role in that regard as well. But to me, talking to Veach about that, kind of like the question, going back to like what you said, Sam, I mean, they had a chance to sign him, but they targeted Justin Reid very early and made a concerted effort to go after him. As you said, they do tend to go young with their free agent signings. We've seen that time after time. Justin Reid is a younger player, but they seem to love what he can do in the run game. And if you specifically think about some of the top opponents in the AFC, like a Josh Allen, like a Lamar Jackson, he specifically could potentially match up very well against those guys.
The element they lose in Tyron is that leadership. I mean, you look at their secondary, and they're really young back there. L'Jarius Sneed is suddenly the veteran of the cornerbacks, and Juan Thornhill, the veteran of the safeties. Juan Thornhill has not been a regular starter. He's still trying to prove that he's an every down player in this league. And Justin Reid, I absolutely think has that qualities, but he does. He said that Steve Spagnuolo is running the deepest playbook he's ever been a part of. He's still going to have to learn the playbook before he can take on that leadership role and get other guys lined up in the right spot. That's going to be something I think is going to improve as the season goes on.
I think with anything with Justin Reid too, and I'm going to go back to when he originally signed with the Chiefs and he had his free agent signing news conference with us or Zoom call with us. The thing that stood out to me was when he mentioned he had the opportunity to learn from Mathieu in Houston. So he watched and he absorbed how Mathieu taught everyone around him. And I think at least that part, he can transition there, but you're right, Sam. He has to learn the playbooks first before he can be the leader and say, hey, you're doing this wrong. But you can't say that if you don't even know the right way to do it.
He said that as much in his recent press conference, Justin Reid did, because he was being asked about being a leader. And he basically said, well, right now I'm listening a lot to Juan Thornhill because I'm the new guy here. You know what I mean? I'm the guy that's trying to learn. So I thought that was an interesting thing for him to say, because it'd be very easy to just say, yeah, I'm a leader and then I talk a lot and all these sorts of stuff. But he kind of deferred in that moment to say, hey, and I think this is true. Bill Self always talked about this. It's tough to lead from the bench. You know what I mean? Not that Justin Reid's going to be on the bench, but it's tough to lead if you don't know the playbook yet, if you're the new guy in here. So I think that'll develop over time. But Sam, you make a really good point that is the sort of intangible thing that's really tough to touch. But it's going to be the thing that the Chiefs probably miss most with Tyron Mathieu, because not only was he emotional leader, but he was getting guys in the right spots and potentially helping out plays before we knew they were, fires and going to be disaster plays for the Chiefs, helping those out before they even started.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between knowing your assignment and knowing everybody's assignment on the field. And also, Tyron would point out when guys weren't in the right spot before the play. He'd also point it out during the play. Also, Jesse, I don't know if this Bill Self thing is going to become your Sean Payton thing with Herbie, but it's not off to a great start.
All right,
Sam,
I'll start mentioning Lance Leipold from now on. So that'll be the new one.
Sam, it's hilarious you say that, because the minute he mentioned Bill Self, I was thinking that in my head. Okay, we're going to go from the Saints to KU Jayhawks time now.
That's all right. I couldn't stop talking about Bill Russell all day today, and half the people didn't know who he was until they heard about it in his obituary earlier today. So we all have our points of reference. So
everybody on this call knows who Bill Russell is. Just want to point it out. It's not anybody on this call who doesn't know that.
All right. I'll trust you on that. Hey, there was in the press tent today was Mike Dana and Herbie's second favorite player, Elijah Lee, and then Travis Kelce, the tight end. We were going to get to some Kelce audio today, but I think I'm going to save that until tomorrow, and let's have a little bit more expanded conversation about the tight end position. So Travis Kelce was interesting, as he always is, but I think we're going to save his clip and the conversation about Travis for tomorrow's show. So there's a tease. Come join us tomorrow to hear what we have to say about the game's best tight end. Okay, and also I'm getting a little worried about Jesse out there. We're going to need the spatula to get him out of his seat and out of the heat.
I was counting. These chairs have I should show you guys this here. Can I swing it over? Like these chairs have little. It's like grill marks. You know what I'm saying?
Grilled Griffin on your back.
So my butt my butt is literally getting fried out here. So yeah, you should be worried about me here. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like a little hamburger patty right here.
There's a producer. There's a producer in all of our ears saying, "Get out of this, Blair."
and out we will get. But before we do, and Jesse has to sit here for another 30 seconds because he has to hear that we owe a debt of gratitude to our producer, Monty Davis. Big thanks to our sponsor, First Federal Bank. Big thanks to Jesse Newell, Herbie Teope, Sam McDowell, and we'll be back with you tomorrow at 2:30. Join us then, please.